This week, we welcome Edna Conway, Chief Security Officer, Global Value Chain at Cisco. In the Leadership and Communication segment, MasterCard CTO reveals must have executive leadership traits, 10 presentation ideas that will radically improve your presentation skills, 7 tech skills managers hunt for, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Security can't solve crucial problems when they have to wade through thousands of alerts a day. With ServiceNow, you can easily prioritize and respond to your most crucial business threats. That way you can go from overwhelmed to under control. ServiceNow brings security, risk, and IT together on one platform. Learn more at securityweekly.com/ServiceNow. How do you stay ahead of attackers while trying to maintain the strength of your current security posture? At TrustedSec, they believe research goes hand in hand with security consulting. In addition to their established security offerings, they continually advance their own expertise with a dedicated, experienced research team led by Carlos Perez that works on short and long-term projects to assist their consultants during engagements, developing proprietary attack vectors and investigating new threats. Go to trustedsec.com/Security Weekly to learn more about the pioneering research team at TrustedSec. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 134, recorded July 1st, 2019. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in a rainy Colorado. Paul is on vacation, but I am joined by my co-host, Jason Albuquerque, who's in G Unit Studios
How you doing,
in Rhode
Matt?
Island. Good
It's
to
a
have
sunny
you
day
on.
here in Rhode Island.
Yeah, my weather like swaps. It's like following me. It was raining last week in Rhode Island. Now it's raining here.
Oh boy. Don't come back to Rhode Island for a little while then.
Okay. Next month. Oh, at the end of this month. Sorry, July. Forgot. Security Weekly is returning to Vegas this August for Black Hat and DEF CON. If you would like to request a briefing or sponsor an interview on site at Black Hat, please go to securityweekly.com/booking and submit your requests. We are getting pretty full with the sponsored interviews. I think 19 of 20, and I think we're going to open up a few more. I think we only have like 6 left. We're recording 2 shows live from Mandalay Bay for Black Hat. Enterprise Security Weekly is fully sold out. We are still working on Paul's Security Weekly show while we're in Vegas. It'll be fun for anybody who wants to join us. Also, some of you have told us that you're overwhelmed by the amount of content we distribute. In an attempt to make it a little easier for you to find what you're interested in, we've created the new listener interest list. Sign up for the list and select your interest by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe and click the button to join the list. I did show the team last week the new website design. That's what I've been working on for the past quarter. New navigation to make it easier to find. And all these new interest subjects on the interest list will be categorized for our content. You'll be able to search and filter by those on the new website. You'll start to see that, I hope, this quarter in the next month or so as we get ready to go to Black Hat and pull all this stuff together, make it much easier to find content. All right, let's get to our interview. Edna Conway currently serves as Cisco's Chief Security Officer, Global Value Chain, creating clear strategies to deliver secure operating models for the digital economy. She's built new organizations delivering cybersecurity, compliance, risk management, sustainability, and value chain transformation. She drives a comprehensive security architecture across Cisco's third-party ecosystem and is recognized both domestically and globally as the developer of architectures delivering value chain security, sustainability, and resiliency. Her work has been featured in a range of publications. I cannot name them all in this intro, analyst reports, and case studies. Her discussions on key issues can be found on Conway's blog. Edna, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Well, thank you. What a joy to be back, and really delighted to be talking to you from home for once. First week since January in New Hampshire.
That's great. Now, I didn't read all of your bio because I wanted to start a little bit with your background and how you got into security, because your background's a little interesting. I think you're the former Attorney General in New Hampshire. How did you get into security? Walk us through a little bit of that past and that background.
So it's an interesting background, and lots of folks are aware of it, but there's been a common theme, right, which is I've always been focused on intellectual property, let's be honest, and intellectual property protection. And when you think about where our ideas reside in a digital economy, it was sort of a natural trajectory. So 20 years as a practicing attorney, straight out of law school, I prosecuted homicides, and then had the privilege of coming to join Cisco in its internal in-house legal department, focusing again on intellectual property and licensing, and then walked through a variety of different organizations at Cisco and engineering and supply chain operations. I've been really thinking about the ways in which we can drive what I like to call pervasive security throughout not only our internal organization, but with the vast number of third parties who actually touch at any point in the life cycle of our solutions what we sell to our customers.
Last week we actually interviewed Tom Garuba, who's the CISO over at Shared Assessments Program, because my start has a third-party vendor angle to it. I managed a third-party vendor management program with one of the large banks back in the early part of my career that turned me into a product guy. And I don't think there's enough attention applied to the risk associated with third parties and the supply chain. And I think this is something you have to deal with a lot in Cisco, thinking about how you bring all the different components together for your gear and the software and all the other pieces. I think a lot of people struggle with this and don't pay it the attention it needs.
So, I would have said that I think the eyes of the world are on us now. And as you and I have chatted about, some days you sort of want to say, where have you been, right? Because all of us have a supply chain, and there's a little bit of a nomenclature challenge as well. For those of us who actually deliver services or make things that are tangible and offer services, what we have seen is we tend to use value chain. For those like, let's say, a financial institution, not that they don't offer services that bring value, but they're not building them themselves, right? They're building it on top of that which already exists. What we see is supply chain, and particularly in the governments around the world. So assume when I say value chain, I mean the full end-to-end life cycle, right? Starting with that first creative idea of, I have an idea on a new product or a feature in something that already exists in the information communications technology arena, which is where I live. But you're right. I think what folks are realizing is as we digitize more and more, and quite frankly, as we just get more operationally efficient and continue to make the buy-sell decisions that enterprise have been making all along, we now need to look at who we're partnering with, who we're letting inside our own fold from our enterprise operations. But more importantly, what kind of commitments are we giving to our customers? And are the third parties who are involved at some point in the creation, sustainment, or resolution at their end of life of our offers actually equally committed? And do they understand what we mean when we look at our customers and say, look, we're committed to integrity, and that means you're going to get something from us that's free of taint, it's not counterfeit, and it's going to operate in the way in which you intended it without any external control. We are not going to misuse intellectual property. And oh, by the way, any third party who's involved in our family has an equal attention to security hygiene from an information security perspective at the same level as we do. That sounds easy to say. It's a big statement.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work because think about all the policies and procedures you have to get your partners to implement and then make sure that they're doing it. That you're right. It's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, I mean, from someone in my perspective as a CISO for a technology services provider who's also a Cisco Gold partner, so we've had such an incredible relationship with Cisco over the years. Not only are we, Gold UC, we're Master Security, so we're very heavily involved in the Cisco world, right? But from my perspective, we have 6,000 customers, and with the Ciscos of the world, we have other partners as well that we have to work with and ensure that we're putting our best foot forward for our 6,000 customers and saying that our supply chain is going to be just as secure as Carousel's supply chain. Right, we want to make sure we're holding those partners and vendors accountable to the same level that we hold ourselves. And for me, it's that's a huge blind spot in some cases, right? Because with a great relationship like Cisco, we know you're doing the due diligence, so we need to do a better job up front vetting those partners and making sure we're having the right partners join our organization up front, right? So it's not a reactive posture, it's a proactive posture. So we need to be looking at not only can we sell what this manufacturer is trying to deliver, but are we vetting them up front to make sure that they meet the scrutiny that they need to meet, right? It's not just about the product, it's about the entire ecosystem of that partner.
I think that's right. And I think to your point, quite frankly, your integrity is intricately related to ours. Right? Because at the end of the day, you're our delivery mode. Mm-hmm. And so when you step back and you say in a very inelegant way, but the most meaningful way I can, as an Italian mother, we're in the wedding soup together, right? That's where we sit and that's where we reside together. Recognizing that is a very different approach because all of a sudden, and I think, Matt, you said something too about, shared assessments, right? Thinking about the way in which we come together as a community and we sit and think about the members of that community that we're all leveraging in a certain way, we have to get to operational efficiency. How can we leverage things like shared assessments and, more importantly, the right international standards? I think those are key foundational elements. But never forget the human element. I've been saying for a while that lots of folks think that the currency of the digital economy is data. I have a slightly different view on that. I think the currency is the same currency it's always been. I think the currency is trust. Mm-hmm. And I think data actually allows us to build trust. And certain technologies that are out there allow us to have confidence in the data upon which we're building that trust. But it comes down to a partner-to-partner understanding. Where are you going? What are you delivering to your particular customers? And what I've seen that's really a challenge for all of us right now is both an opportunity to sit together, but an opportunity to change the thinking around what public-private partnership means in this year and moving forward. So, Matt, you and I were chatting a bit ago about some of the things that we're seeing trends just in the United States with, the Secure Technology Act that came out in December that created this first ever Federal Acquisition Security Council to think not in an isolationist way, agency by agency, but to think about how are we, the enterprise known as the U.S. federal government, procuring and utilizing the full spectrum of information communications technologies and services. And then on top of that, you see our friends over at the Department of Homeland Security actively in the new CISA organization, right, thinking about where the private sector, which, let's be honest, foundationally forms the basis for our nation's critical infrastructure, should be playing together with government and setting standards together, perhaps leveraging our colleagues over at Commerce and NIST. So it's a really exciting time right now because folks have opened their eyes to the fact that the playground needs to be open to all, and we all are playing in the same sandbox. There's only so many tools to go around, and almost in a limited but an almost infinite way in which we can play with that. right? And that's the uniqueness of where we find ourselves today. We can set new standards. We can use that which already exists and try not to proliferate to the point where we actually develop a compliance mentality rather than a creative, security, innovative mindset.
Yeah, are we seeing good rules established for this sandbox? Because I think that's one of the interesting things. And you said it, right? If we go down the compliance path and we do this from a regulatory perspective, we're just going to kind of check the box, and we know we're not going to be any better off from a security perspective. But who's going to help establish the rules in the sandbox, and then how can we make sure that those get implemented in this new playground? Because I think that's going to be very important.
I think there are lots of people trying to do the right thing. And so, I see it happening in the U.S. I see it happening over in Europe, for example, with something that we have signed on to, which is not public-private, but actually a private-to-private endeavor where certain companies have come together in something called the Charter of Trust, thinking about what, certainly I've been talking about for a while, which is the issues around IT-OT convergence. And lots of folks have talked about the realities of the risks inherent in Internet of Things devices. But when you start to think about that at the proliferation rate that we're seeing both on the consumer and industrial side, what that means is we need to sit together and come up with fundamental principles and some light touch baseline requirements that are elastic and flexible. And let's talk a little bit about elasticity and flexibility, because so many people think international standards, legislation, certifications, they're rigid. They don't give me what I need. They don't understand the uniqueness of my innovative solution. Wrong. If we are sitting together, what we can do is write foundational goals in a way that are elastic and flexible enough that each of us can come in and deploy them in a fashion that is best suited for our particular nature of purposes, whether it's a software environment, whether it's a cloud environment. I mean, imagine how you're going to evaluate a third-party cloud service provider, right? We've seen EU has the Cloud Code of Conduct, as you know, and ESA right now over in Europe is looking at how they're going to actually implement the standard certification underneath the EU Cybersecurity Act, which has been out for a while. So sitting together in something like the Charter of Trust or sitting on a U.S. DHS task force and saying, this is what we can do together. Here's a way to use words that give us the elasticity to allow that sensor device manufacturer or a full portfolio capability of a company like a Cisco or some of our other colleagues in information and communications technology to come in and leverage it in the unique way in which it works for them is the hard part, but what will get us to where we need to go for the future. So no longer am I going to look at you and say, your flag needs to be 6 by 11. It needs to have red, white, and blue, and it cannot have tassels. I'm going to say, I need a flag. It needs to be something that demarks the nation. It needs to be reflective of the nation. It needs to utilize your ingenuity, etc. All of a sudden, creative juices flow and security becomes built in because you're thinking about it as part of the innovation process rather than as the compliance modality after the fact.
Yeah, which has been one of the things that has plagued us for a long time is we always, it was the regulation forced what we had to do. So we did the minimum and said we're compliant and off it went, but not necessarily secure. So Edna, in your day-to-day operations in the value chain at Cisco, where are some of the big challenges that you have to face every day, and how are you trying to solve some of those?
So I think there's challenges in multiple places, right? I mean, I think we still see, let's take hardware for example. I think we still see a lot of counterfeit stemming from scrap, right? Seemingly inelegant part of the value chain. But scrap management, understanding where your scrap goes, understanding what's important, what isn't important, and then putting the overlay of what needs to be destroyed, what shouldn't be destroyed. And maybe you don't want to destroy it because there's export duties that you have to be aware of. these are complexities that if you look at them and say, I'm going to have a comprehensive view on how I'm going to handle physical scrap, all of a sudden it becomes manageable. And it only becomes manageable, I think, to the point we've all been talking about, which is when you're working with, for example, a channel partner. Or working with a member of that value chain. I think the other area that we're seeing continue to see challenges, and I think we'll be talking about this for a long time, is when you look at software, third-party software, how do we really know the effectiveness of a secure development lifecycle that's deployed by that third-party software provider? What are they doing? What are the indicia that we can look for beyond just signatures? Can we have a conversation about that? And when you move from a pure third-party licensor of commercial software into the wonderful world of what we all know has great power behind it, right? The power of the collective, open source software, you add a whole nother element of the unknown from a security perspective. So I think looking more carefully about how we may want to understand software bills of material around open source is another area where even in the U.S., the U.S. NTIA is looking at, can that help us? Would it be helpful? And sometimes you have to step back and be careful what you ask for, because getting something may not necessarily give you all of the information that you actually need to effectively make a prudent security decision. It may just give you more information.
Right. Yeah, we've covered on Application Security Weekly, the show that kind of airs before this one that I co-host with some AppSec experts, is, the software bill of materials challenge, right? We don't know what's in the open source. We don't know all the dependencies in the different libraries. Are there known vulnerabilities that need to be addressed? We don't know who's potentially contributing to some of these open source projects, so we don't know if they're implementing potentially backdoors into some of these binaries. So, I think it's a pretty big concern across the board, especially, as we continue to digitize everything and move everything into an application at the end of the day. We're definitely seeing some challenges there, which I think will be something that we'll continue to talk about for a really, really long time because of where we're moving from a technology stack.
I think that's true. I think, even on the education side, when you think about challenges, I was just talking at a university recently, and they asked me an interesting question, which was, if you had to redesign the way in which we educated for this new environment in which we find ourselves, what would that look like? Not being an education expert, I had to step back and think about it. And I think it's the recognition that we sort of, if you remember back about 30 years ago, what we did in healthcare, we specialized. And not that you don't need specialization, but we specialized to such a degree that often you found yourself with a particular specialist who may not have the visibility to the holistic ramifications of what was going on in your body, right? The classic example of that is you think about cancer, where they now convene tumor boards. What a lovely name for anything, but it is a positive, right? That tumor board has, the folks who are endocrinologists and internists and oncologists, et cetera, thinking in a holistic fashion. I think we need to step back and think about, as an industry, if security, rather than talking about designing it in, if security is simply part of what we need to do business in today's day and age, then how can we educate ourselves and operate where we don't specialize in a manner that actually segregates? There's specialization and then there's collaboration. And sometimes the two don't go hand in hand. So having our hardware architect experts understand how the software translates into the firmware, doing things like a secure boot handshake with the architecture and the software, not just checking for signatures, so that you'll get, guess what? You'll boot something up and they'll say, no, you don't get to upload or download the next version of whatever operating system it is something's rogue on this machine, your gray market. That takes a combination of software and digital device integration that we need to strive for more moving forward. So I think that's a really big challenge we need to get our arms around, bringing everybody to the table and creating our own digital board where we think holistically rather than separating. I mean, I can't tell you the number of places where, the guy's doing agile DevOps and the Scrum is over on, one building, and the folks who are hardcore ASIC experts are in a whole nother part of the campus. Heavens to Betsy, what do we think the firmware is that actually runs the operating systems, right? So that's a new mode that we need to get our arms around collaboratively as we design and develop.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the integration of security and the development life cycles are key to being able for us to keep up. Go back 30 years, about the time I started in the space, security was an afterthought, right? It was an afterthought to the internet. It was an afterthought to PCs. It was an afterthought to everything. And so the way I describe it is, for a long time, we kind of wrapped security around the technology. I think the only way to solve this is we have to think about security being inside the technology. And if we can get there, that means we have to collaborate from the security side into the development side, bring those teams together, and figure out how to solve this from the inside out instead of the outside in, which is traditionally how we've done it.
Yeah. It has to be baked into the DNA of the community, right? I mean, we nailed it earlier. It's a shared responsibility across the entire community. And that community can be from the hardware manufacturers to the software developers to the partners like myself. We have to have this strong community where we're collaborating together, because in many instances, because we're a Cisco partner, we're going to lean on Cisco and say, hey, have you done your due diligence? We're going to have that level of trust with our partner because we've built that strong relationship, right? And it's the conversations that we're able to have back and forth between the manufacturers and the partners that allow us to continue to build the trust. And hey, by the way, we're seeing things out in the field that we can pass back up to our partners and share that information, right? Again, we have 6,000 customers, and the amount of information that we can share back to the likes of a Cisco, I think, is huge. I think that's a great intelligence gathering mechanism. I think that upstream feedback to Cisco is something valuable that we can have, and it's just a wonderful relationship to be able to have that today as it exists and just see it maturing over time.
You just made me think of something which I think is very important in response to Matt's question about challenges as well. We've been talking about information sharing in the security arena, whether, private to private, private to government, government to private, for a really long time. But to get the level of synergistic collaboration that you just described, let's be honest. There has to be some kind of safe harbor. There has to be a level not only of trust, but can we say this without, a lot of the reticence for information sharing and a lot of the reason why it's still I know Joe's phone number and I know Ann's phone number and we're talking to one another in an informal fashion is because of concerns about ramifications, whether it's I said something and somebody might pursue me for, gee, you're interfering with my business, or defamation, or there might be a penalty or a fine, or better yet, you might find a governmental agency coming and peeking under the covers. We need to shake off that mindset and say, how can we play in this sandbox together without that fear? And some of that probably needs to come from some safe harbors via legislation, to be quite frank, because you can't have everybody on speed dial. Right? We have to have a way to do this in an effective manner. And the more we connect, the more we're going to see the need for that. So I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about, you piqued my mind with the, we might see something in the field that you'd like to know about. It might be nothing. It might be something. Exactly. We all know early detection and early identification is the ticket to swift resolution.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think we need that shared responsibility has to do with legislation as well. The government has to come in and help support us, right? Because a company like mine can't always be walking on eggshells afraid of the next lawsuit. We need to be able to be open with the likes of Cisco and the likes of our other partners and the likes with the community in general, and not have to fear some type of a lawsuit because we're being open and honest and really want to share that information upstream, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair characterization. It's almost nirvana. It sounds like
Sure.
what we're describing, but I really do. I think it's achievable. I mean, I think the security community is a particularly collaborative community because we recognize the interconnections among all of us. But when you take what I just said, which is, we've got, I mean, these are not insignificant challenges, Matt, right? Change a little bit about education. So I don't have somebody walking out with a computer science degree who, when I look at them and I say, so how much do you know about, a printed circuit board assembly? And do you know what a ball grid array is? And I don't get the blank look like, is that a new, flavor of ice cream? Right? We have to do something in that arena. We have a little bit more of an obligation, I think, as quite frankly, private enterprise to sit with our government around the world and our government enterprises themselves and our regulators and help them understand what models might break us and what models could be useful, because, you can't just complain about the regulations. You have to actually sit at the table and say, let's think through this together. It's a worthy challenge.
That's right.
And then, moving to, but we don't want to stop people from collaborating together and, let's add this. We want to include the small to medium-sized innovators as well, who, rather than having, let's say at Cisco, we have a chief information security officer, we have a chief security and trust officer, we have a CSO of the value chain. They have, the person who is, doing IT, actually probably fixing the toilet bowl, and in addition is also the CIO and the CSO. So recognize, how can we build foundational elastic frameworks that allow them to work for these communities as well? Because innovation comes from all places.
Yeah, and you're right, that one person at the small to medium enterprise is doing IT, security, compliance, and a whole bunch of other stuff at the same time.
And they're somewhere within the supply chain of a company like mine. Right.
Yes.
And we need to make sure that we have that relationship and we're working together to make them stronger so we can do more business with them. Right. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to build a community here. We're trying to build a community that we can trust doing business with each other. And it'd be a disservice to us to not think about the small to medium businesses. We need to be shoring them up, helping them be successful, because then again, all of the small to medium businesses and enterprises and large companies within this country are all going to be secure together. It's that big tent mentality that I think we have to have. So it's my job to do the right thing for the small to medium businesses, right? And it's your job as Cisco to help us as partners. And then it's the government's job to help Cisco, have a seat at the table to make good change.
Yeah, I think it'll happen. I think we need to work on it though, together, right? I mean, if right here now in the U.S., the Department of Energy has put out something where it's a sort of an opportunity for some funding for 5 years. Think about really driving, and you would think this has nothing to do with security, but it gives my heart sort of great hope. When we think about how we make manufacturing more sustainable from a power utilization perspective, that is a worthy challenge. And there are lots of academic teams working on this and bidding to create this institute. But when you look at the request, it also includes and cybersecurity, because the recognition is that as we go sustainable, we're going to automate more. And with automation comes a need to think about security right at the outset. So when I look at that as a glaring example of a government opportunity to spearhead via funding some new innovation on manufacturing sustainability, which embeds cybersecurity and automation at the outset in that, now there's a glaring example of somebody who thought about it from a holistic perspective. And the people who are coming together to respond are academicians as well as enterprises, small and large. So we need more of that. More of that,
Agreed.
Please.
Agreed.
Yes, wholeheartedly agree. Bringing it all together at the beginning makes it so much easier at the end. Edna, thank you so much for a great conversation and for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
My privilege to be here. Thanks for having me.
We'll take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.